This Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing today?
Excelente. You're checking something out there. What's going on? Burglar in the house?
Blue Jays in the ninth inning, but it can wait. Somebody just hit a home run for the bad guys.
Oh, well, there you go. That's why you don't want to follow it. It's just pain, more pain and suffering. Speaking
I
of,
turned it off.
Not speaking of pain and suffering, but it was a pretty good day for the Edmonton Oilers, Bruce, I have to say. We've been hoping that it wouldn't be all bad news in free agency for the Oilers. And there was some bad news with the loss of Klim Kostin and Kailer Yamamoto. Two players that Ken Holland, at least, said that he wanted to keep on the team. I'm not sure if he's being 100% fully transparent on Kailer Yamamoto, but I do believe they really wanted to keep Kostin.
Well,
Anyway,
they asked him about Kailer, and he said he wants to test the market for now, but he didn't say he wasn't interested in him, but he didn't say he was his immediate priority either, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But you never know what goes around comes around. But I'm pretty sure they got the right winger they really wanted this morning.
Connor Brown. We'll talk about Connor Brown. We'll talk about four kind of AHL, NHL tweeners, probably more tweening in the direction of the AHL. Lane Peterson, who's almost scored a goal a game in his 18 games in the AHL last season. Forward, Drake Caggiula, well known to Oilers fans, and two defensemen, Noel Hoffenminer and Sir Gleason. Something or other Gleason. What's his first name? Brad? Tim?
Oh, Ben.
Ben Gleason. Sorry, Ben. Ben Gleason.
Not Jackie.
Not Jackie Gleason Jr. Bruce, we'll talk about Brown last because that's the exciting thing. So you're gonna have to wait, but you won't be disappointed if you wait to hear our discussion about Connor Brown. It's going to be the best Oilers hockey discussion about Connor Brown of all time. But first, we'll go through some of the earlier stuff. So let's first deal with the Yamamoto Kostin thing and whether that was a net. How do you think Ken Holland did overall on that deal? I'll start it off, Bruce, by saying it struck me as a poison pill, not that poisonous. In that they had to sign Yamamoto last year to the contract, and you could argue that they screwed up in giving Yamamoto 2 years.
Yep.
I think that's fair, So yeah. Poison pill in that way. They shouldn't have given that extra year. But if he had scored 20 goals again, he would have been a $4 million player or a $4.5 million player. So, it didn't work out for Holland. But they were going to have to pay him if they wanted him at all, even for 1 year. It was going to be $3 million plus, right? Like that's not up for debate. It's just that extra year that he screwed up on. That said, I think they got out of that rather elegantly. They didn't have to buy him out. It looks like they couldn't afford Klim Kostin. He wanted $2 million a year. He got that from Detroit on 2 years. Yep. So I hated Kostin leaving. I think the Oilers now have a big physical hole in their bottom six that he was that guy. Man, that's a tough guy to find and a tough guy to replace. And I wish the Oilers had found a way to keep him, to figure it out. A lot of people are breathing a heavy sigh of relief that the Oilers dodged a bullet with losing out on Kostin, like that, he was on a high shooting percentage. He was never going to score that rate of goals again, which is a fair comment. But he just offered so much, and he's at 25 years old. I think Detroit got the better of that deal by a country mile because they got the player. They got a budding power forward who I think can play third line, maybe second line, for $2 million a year in the prime of his career. That is a hell of a deal for the Detroit Red Wings, and I wish the Oilers had been able to get it. Not to be.
Well, the prime is a ways off yet, and his next contract could well be bigger than this one, and it could even be a lot bigger than this one. But 2 years for $2 million. on that player based on his half season showing in St. Louis and basically full season in Edmonton. That's a pretty good bet by Eisenman. And basically, they bought the player for $1 million because they paid, basically a
Yeah.
$500,000 buyout for Yamamoto this year and next. And that's all it cost them to get Klim Kostin. And you turn around and look at some of the other deals that took place. I mean, Chicago, who's doing all kinds of weird stuff, I have to say.
Again.
But
Again.
again, yeah. Anyway, they took the guy from New York Islanders. What the heck's the guy's name? Josh Bailey? No.
Yeah.
Brock Nelson? Was it Josh Bailey? Yeah.
It's
Anyway, they
Josh
got
Bailey.
the last year, all those guy, Brock Nelson, Josh Bailey, they all just sound like guys. Anyway, they got the last year at $5 million, Chicago. They bought him out, just like Detroit bought out Yamamoto, except for that cost Chicago $2.33 million. Right?
And what did they get in return?
And what they get for it? A second round draft choice in 2026. So by 2026, they get to draft a player who in 2030 might be Klim Kostin, whereas Detroit just bought Klim Kostin, 23-year-old former first rounder who's now a year and a half NHLer and made a real strong impression here, I have to think. So I think Detroit way outperformed Chicago on that transaction type.
Yeah.
Taking a guy and an asset and then buying the guy out. Well, Detroit got a cheap guy to buy out and they got a real good asset, and Chicago got some, shiny bauble, magic beans, as Dennis King used to call them. And maybe it'll sprout in 2030 or 32 or something, but holy moly, if I was the owner paying off that $2.3 million, I would be asking my GM, what the hell are you doing?
But, sure glad Kostin didn't go to a Western Conference team, Bruce, like Anaheim or Arizona or LA or some or Vegas. I'm just glad Kostin's with Detroit in Detroit because that would.
I wish him well. But
so do I.
He'll get plenty of opportunity there. And the Red Wings signed a bunch of guys today. Holy moly, they were pretty active. So
yeah, JT.
I'm still. Yeah, and some big bucks, eh?
Yeah, 5 years at about $5 million for JT Compher.
Imagine if Holland had done that.
Sprong they got for one year, $2 million. I'm glad Sprong's in the East. There was rumor he was going to go to Colorado. If Holland had signed JT Compher, oh, the funniest
at that rate, five times five. Yeah. That is a big contract for a good, not great player.
Funniest thing of today was the Oilers had reported by Darren Dreger, no less, on TSN that they signed Matt Nieto, who's played more than 600 NHL games somehow. Must be on defensive prowess because he's not a scorer.
He's a penalty
then all of a sudden,
a checker and a grinder.
Fell apart all of a sudden. He went to Pittsburgh, and I had already posted on Dreger's rumor, and that just seemed like a done deal. Well, it's what he said it was, but it wasn't anyway. But the Oilers, they did, Lane Peterson is mid-20s. He's a big scoring AHL player. We know Drake Caggiula is he must be late 20s now. And
29.
And he played in the AHL all of last year. He was a pretty close to a point a game guy. So and then they signed these two defensemen, Hoffenmeyer and Gleason. And Bruce, they're the exact same player as Cam Dineen. They're all kind of, by NHL standards, undersized left shot defensemen.
Average size at best.
Average size, who at the AHL level put up a good number of points.
Yeah.
So the left side of the Bakersfield Hunters defense is like they got some smoking puck movers by AHL standards. But did you need three of them? I mean, unless one of them can move over and play the right side. So right now, if you're just looking at prospects, I mean, they have Max Wanner, who's coming out of Moose Jaw. He had a good season in Moose Jaw. His game developed quite a bit. And he's going to be the rookie there. But and then they have two veterans in Niemelainen and Kemp, who are 22, 23. 23 years old, and they're both physical players who aren't as adept at moving the puck. And then they have these three puck movers. So it's an interesting mix, not without a lot of prospects, but a lot of players who, for a game or two, could fill in the NHL. Cam Dineen could do that. He's already done that. Nima Lining can do that. So there's some call-up potential there, but it's a bit of an odd mix. I thought they might have brought in one more really big Bobby Clobber of a defenseman to round out that group.
Here's something that just jumped off Hoffenmeier's. I'm going to have to add to my post. Last year, not only did he get 11-27 for 38 points in 65 games with Toronto Marlies, not bad. Anytime a D-man, all three of these guys were like half a point a game or better. 114 minutes and penalties last year for Hoffenmeier. So it doesn't sound like he's a shy guy.
That's interesting.
He's not that big, but
and look at this, Bruce.
Uh-huh.
Throughout his career, it's the first season in his career that he's had throughout junior, 5 years in Ottawa playing junior.
Yeah.
And we're looking at now 3 years in the minors.
Yeah.
And this is the first time in his career he's had more than a penalty minute a game.
Yeah.
And he did it
even in junior.
Now, maybe there was one or two incidents where he just racked up 1 billion penalty minutes in one game, or he's made a conscious decision. I want to be an NHL player, and I'm 6 feet, 192 pounds. If I'm going to do that, and I've got some offensive game, I can move the puck probably at an NHL level. But maybe he's made up his mind that if he's gonna do that, he's got to be the orneriest 6-foot defenseman in the AHL, which is a really good decision to make, by the way. For a lot, I often watch AHL games, and it's the thought going through my head this isn't easy to do, right? To suddenly be a much more physically aggressive player, because you have to have guts, and you take a battering and you take a beating, and you got to have mental strength to play that way. It's a really hard way to play hockey, because you're going to be getting it way more than you probably did when you kept your head down. But maybe he's made that choice.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking up his game log here in the AHL, and he had one game with 21 PIMs, another was 17, and then a few weeks later, another was 17. So that's 55 of his 114 minutes came in just 3 games. So clearly, probably a fight and a misconduct in each case. You could get further into the summary, but I'd guess 17 minutes is a minor, major, and misconduct, or possibly even one instigating incident where you get all 3 at once. And anyway,
so maybe he made up his mind to take some fights, which is again another sign of someone who's decided to become a more aggressive hockey player. Anyway, well, we don't know that. This is just speculation, but that's an interesting point that you made about
6 games with odd number of penalty minutes of 5 or greater. So those would probably all be fights.
Yeah. Or a major for
maybe
boarding.
A major penalty. Well, maybe one of them is a border, but the vast majority of all majors are fights.
Okay, Nick Bjugstad, Bruce. He chose Arizona 2-year deal for, was it 2.1 million each?
Per year. Yeah.
Per year. Yeah. So to sign in Edmonton, he probably would have had to take $1 million a year.
Why would he do that?
I don't, again, it's like Costin. Like, I don't blame any people will say, well, if you wanted to win a Stanley Cup, you'd stay here. And I actually think it would be Costin's decision. If he had decided to bet on himself in Edmonton, I think would have been a reasonable decision, because I think he could really do well here in Edmonton, become a big piece of a cup winning team, and crank up his value significantly. Bjugstad, I'm not as sure about, because he's what is he, 30 years old. He's he's got to make hay while the sun shines. How much longer, how many more years does he have an NHL player? I don't blame him at all for, looking for a nice double the payday,
right,
he would have got in Edmonton.
Yeah, well, he got 900,000 1-year contracts for 900,000 each of the last 2 years, and then this year he had a good year, and lo and behold, he gets a 2-year offer at more than double the pay rate. I mean, and obviously they liked him in Arizona, that they traded him and then went out and got him back, and he's at a place where he's clearly comfortable, and they are too. And if you go ahead and criticize guys for leaving if you like, but this is July 1st, David. This is Mercenary Day in the National Hockey League, and all the guys on the UFA list. There's not a lot of loyalty there because generally by the time they got to that list, they not got necessarily all the loyalty they might have got from their teams either. And it's just time for moving on. And sometimes you have a guy like is a good fit. And Nick Bukestad, I'll say this, at $450,000 cap hit, he was a fantastic fit. At $2.1 million, well, the Oilers just can't do that. And they can't do $2 million for Klim Kostin. And these guys priced themselves out. The guys who didn't, Derek Ryan and Matthias Janmark, they're back with signed contracts. And then the jury is out, and the sword of Damocles hangs high overhead over the negotiations of Evan Bouchard and Ryan McLeod. But I'll say this, Holland absolutely maximized his cap space for those guys today because he signed 5 players to NHL contracts, and every single one of them is on the books for NHL minimum next year.
Because they want to maybe play in the NHL.
Yeah. I mean, the one exception is Brown, of course, with his NHL minimum plus $3.225 million in bonuses that rounds it up to a cool $4 million contract if he achieves the bonuses. But the thing about those bonuses is that they don't come out of next year's cap when the Oilers are upcoming year's cap, when the Oilers know they're really stressed. They got him on the books at NHL minimum, which is to say $2.3 million less than Kailer Yamamoto was making to try and play the same position. And I'm pretty sure that they just upgraded at right wing in the top 6 at basically, well, in fact, exactly a quarter of the cap hit of what Yamamoto made at 3.1.
Yeah.
So it's, he gambled, the bonuses of the following year to push his chips in. But to me, this is just another way of going all in and saying, we haven't really got the money, but we're going to borrow some from the future, and we're going to get this guy on our team. And we've just solidified our team at the cheapest rate possible in terms of what gets charged to the salary cap in 23-24. And all the other guys, same thing, NHL minimum. So I see most of them as being in the minors, but when they do get called up, they won't have any impact on the salary cap at all, other than the minimum salary itself. So
yeah.
He's clearly, he's not throwing the money around. There was some 2-year terms today, a couple of 1-year terms, and all at minimum salary in the immediate short term. So that leaves whatever, obviously you needed to have another right winger on the team. In fact, they still need a couple of players on the team, and that's where McLeod and Bouchard come in. But he's left himself as much money to negotiate with those guys as he could have, based on where he was at 9:00 this morning.
Yeah. He's throwing his toonies around like they were manhole covers.
Yeah.
All right. So Connor Brown, Bruce, well, I wrote a post, and we'll just kind of go through where I kind of rounded up comments on the internet and Twitter, which was, by the way, if your Twitter wasn't working today, just get TweetDeck. It's a service online service affiliated with Twitter, and I didn't miss anything on TweetDeck. If you have that, it's a fantastic service, which is free, and until Elon Musk makes it otherwise, it worked like a charm today. I know a lot of people were frustrated. Anyway, I avoided that. So, Bruce, it's I think we should give, in terms of journalists breaking the story, Chris Johnson was the most definitive yesterday. I think it was yesterday, saying this was going to happen. And then today, Kevin Weeks actually broke it, of ESPN. He's the one who came out affirmatively. And then for a while there, people were backtracking, saying, well, we don't know if this is correct. If Weeks has it right, he might have it wrong. But about 30, 40 minutes later, it was confirmed. In fact, he had signed with the Oilers. The first comment, I'll read you the comments and I'll get you to get what you think. This is from Oilers fan Shaydon at Shay_Nuge93. He says, the list of former Leafs that have signed with the Oilers in the past few years. 2023, Connor Brown. 2022, Jack Campbell, Greg McKay, Calvin Pickard. 2021, Zach Hyman and Cody Ceci. 2020, Tyson Barrie, Seth Griffith, Tyler Ennis. Safe to say we love our Leafs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can add our newest guy, Noel Hoffenmeyer, to this list because he came from the Marlies.
Indeed.
So this is back to the days of Dallas Aikens, signing Will Acton as a free agent, right? We've got our pipeline to Toronto. And seriously, it's the third summer in a row where we've gone in July 1st, where the featured signing was almost known in advance, or certainly widely speculated in advance. And each time it was a former Toronto Maple Leaf. Of course, both Zach Hyman and Jack Campbell came directly from Toronto, whereas Connor Brown started in Toronto and has, spent almost all of his career in Canada. This year he went from Ottawa to Washington, where he played 4 games, and otherwise he's only played for Canadian teams. So that's kind of unusual about him. But he's it's funny how that Toronto pipeline works, and hopefully he's one that will pan out. He is, David, part of the greatest class of rookies playing the same position on one team that I've ever seen, the 2016-17 Toronto Maple Leafs, whose right shot wingers, natural right wingers, included Mitchell Marner, William Nylander, Zach Hyman, Connor Brown, and Kasperi Kapanen, that all played on one team as rookies in the same season. Kapanen just a few games, but the other guys were regulars. And of course, that was the Austin Matthews team, but he didn't play wing. He played center, but he was a rookie as well. And they just shot up the charts, went from kind of a poor team to a pretty good one in one season, and became a regular contender thereafter. And of course, in Hyman and Brown now, the Oilers got 2 of those guys, and the other 2, at least for now, Marner and Nylander, are still with Toronto, and Kapanen's bumped around. He's in Detroit or in Pittsburgh, but they're all still in the NHL all these years later.
That's interesting. I think it's safe to say, Bruce, that the Toronto Maple Leafs are now the farm team of the Edmonton Oilers.
So seems
that's
so.
a really interesting development in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is from Leaf fans, Brian B. Leafs at Brian B. Leafs. Connor Brown and Zach Hyman, all the Leafs' hardest workers, had to go because of bad signing and core 4 demands, reuniting for a cup run. Cool. Oilers fan JFMJ93
One
says...
thought on that, sorry, before we go on. Yeah. They quoted Mike Babcock today, is basically saying the same thing, that his 2 favorite players when he was in Toronto were Hyman and Brown because of their work ethic.
Sweet.
So,
Oilers fan JFMJ93, someone let me know what's so special about Connor Brown. So, Bruce, what we know about him is his points per 60 for the last 3 years, which for him actually just is kind of the 2 previous years to this one, because he goes out all year after injuring his knee after 4 games. He had surgery on his knee, and from Brown's own self-description, it was only it's in the last month that his knee started to feel dynamic again and really good. But he does say it feels really good. What are you going to say just before you're about to sign a contract? But he sounded genuine. As he said that, he did sound like he was genuinely relieved and happy with how things were going in his rehab. We've seen Connor McDavid come back not from non-surgery. And came back strong. So knee injuries aren't what they used to be in the days of Bobby Orr, when they were a thing of massive, unholy dread in the NHL. They're still not good, obviously, but players do come back regularly from knee surgery with and look fine. So Connor Brown's points per 60 at even strength is 1.72 per 60. So that's exactly the same in the last 3 years as Warren Fogle. It's just a little bit less than Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and a little bit less than Klim Kostin. It's a little bit more than Derek Ryan, Cutter Yamamoto, and Nick Bjugstad. So we see kind of a player who had even strength. He hasn't played with the best line mates in the world. He was in Ottawa those years. Mm-hmm. He wasn't playing, I don't think, with league leading scorers, but he did a good job of putting up points. He was a solid point scorer. He's right in the middle of the NHL. Out of 454 NHL forwards who played at least 800 minutes in that time span, he ranked 238th. So that puts him kind of on a third line point scoring scenario. We also know from all reports, he's an extremely hard worker. He's a very smart player, and he's a strong defensive player who can add a lot to the penalty kill. And that's exciting to me because the Oilers need help on the penalty kill and they need help defensively. If they brought in another player, like let's say he's as good as Matthias Janmark, who also signed a new deal for $1 million a year. If he's as good as Matthias Janmark defensively, but has more offensive oomph, which it looks like he does, than Janmark, and Janmark had a bid, I think we're going to really like this signing because the Oilers need sound defensive players
desperately
like Derek Ryan, like Janmark, to work with some of these other players. And if Brown can lead the way and also put up points, let's say he plays with Draisaitl and McDavid and starts to get more like 2 points per 60 or 2.1 or 2.2 points per 60, which is not impossible. Hyman these last 3 years is at 2.4 per 60, for instance. This signing could be just fantastic, Bruce. It's given how little money Ken Holland had to work with, and I know some people wanted him to buy out Warren Fogle and Cody Ceci and on, and we'll get to that in a second. But given how little money, cap space, that Ken Holland had to work with this year, boy, that's a tremendous signing. And I'm going to quote someone by the name of Bruce McCurdy on that particular point. Here's Bruce's quote, which I have in my story today on the Brown signing. Bruce writes, "Wowza, that is one hell of a minimum salary player, even as the piper will get paid down the road. The trickster Ken Holland," paraphrased, said, "I can't afford to be giving out $4 million contracts." What does he do? Gives out a 1-year, $4.025 million contract. Not lying, just misdirection. He is laser focused on the 23-24 cap ceiling. This is a different application of all in, by the way. What do you mean by that last point?
He's going all in for this year by using going outside the boundaries, and using next year's cap to pay this year's player. And if you want to say he's not doing enough to maximize, well, I don't know how you can maximize any more than getting a $4 million player on a $775,000 cap hit for this year. Now he's going to pay for that down the road, but if you're going to say, well, he's just not doing enough, I don't buy it. Maybe he's not doing enough, but he sure in the hell isn't doing nothing, which is he's sleeping, he's going, stop.
People are he's asleep. I like trickster, that he's a trickster. Bruce. That's a good way to do it. Like he was that was a very
he actually said 4 million. I can't afford, and it turns out my 4.025 is actually an overstatement. The bonus was not 3.25 as reported, but 3.225 to make it exactly $4 million if he achieves his games played bonuses. So
indeed. So no, that was a really good comment, by the way. It's in the headline of the story, the first part of it.
In his 3 years in Toronto, David, this is he played 82, 82, and 82 games. Pretty nice. And his total points per 60, playing basically third line and defense checking penalty killing role, 1.41, 1.4, and 1.41. That's pretty consistent. And then in Ottawa, He played 71, 56, and 64 games. And bear in mind, the first two seasons of that were shortened by COVID to essentially 71 and 56 games. So only in his third year in Ottawa did he ever get hurt. And he was 199, 185, 171, and he averaged 1.86 over those 3 years. And you included in your 3 year thing the current 4 games in
Yeah,
Washington.
where he didn't score.
In his previous sort of 3 full years, he was 1.86, which is pretty darn respectable. And the other thing about Brown is he is a big time penalty killer. And if you look at NHL stats from 2016 to 22, and just kind of leave out last year, where obviously it went sideways for him. Not that it changed his average, but his average on the PK was 2 minutes and 16 seconds, which ranked in the top 10 among NHL forwards for the 3 year span. And his actual total ice time on the penalty kill was third, behind only Luc Glendening and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, both of them basically PK specialists throughout their time. And Brown's just been putting in, 2+ minutes a game. His average was 217 for the 6 years and 216 shorthanded. And he's just a workhorse on the penalty kill.
Yeah, I wonder who he'll be with. Probably McLeod, or sometimes
McDavid.
They put out the. And McDavid. Like I could see them putting out Brown for the first face-off.
Yeah.
And then flying out for the end with McDavid.
Yeah,
that's how it might happen. There's a question: is he going to be better than Yamamoto? Here's two different Oiler fans weighing in. Oilers blogger Sid of Oilers Nation says, quote, he has a history of strong 5-on-5 scoring, and he's also a much better passer than given credit for. I'm quite confident that he will be an upgrade on Yamamoto. But here is Oilers fan Summit Tripathi saying, apart from being taller, I fail to see Brown being an upgrade on Yamamoto. I hope Holland signs a couple extra middle six forwards to hedge his bets. Bruce, I will say this. In the regular season, I expect that he will be a better defensive player than Kailer Yamamoto was last year, at least in the last few years. And in the playoffs, he will be hard pressed to be Yamamoto was so ineffective in the playoffs. Brown is almost certain to be better because Yamamoto didn't get a whole lot done. He could be a difference maker in the playoffs in a way that Kailer Yamamoto wasn't. Now, it doesn't mean Kailer Yamamoto can't be that player going forward, but he hasn't been. And he's been significantly weaker in each of his 4 years in the playoffs than he was in the regular season. So when you look at point scoring, Brown, with less impressive line mates, outscored Yamamoto at even strength in recent years. He's a better defensive player. He is a bigger hockey player. I think it's a pretty safe bet that he's going to be a better player than Kailer Yamamoto this coming year. Maybe not a whole heck of a lot better, but I bet you in the playoffs he's going to be a whole heck of a lot better given Yamamoto's performance.
Yeah, I don't think Yamamoto's scratching around at that near the 2 points per 60 rate. Isn't he down more like 1.5? And
last 3 years, 1.57.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, that includes a lot of time with McDavid, Draisaitl, or both on his line. And the production just isn't there. Now, as for Brown, I've now lost his page, unfortunately, but I'm just going to bring up who his line mates were in his 3 years in Ottawa.
I'll read you Craig Button's comment really quickly.
Okay, go for it.
TSN, Craig Button. I think one of the key things to play with Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl is to have a lot of intelligence, and Connor Brown has lots of intelligence. It's a really a nice fit. Mm-hmm. And Button is a fairly astute observer of players. Here's from Sportsnet's Mike Futa, who was a longtime hockey executive in LA, I believe. He said, I love that move. He was such a leader in Toronto. They loved him. I know Senators coach G.J. Smith was really upset that they lost him in Ottawa. I like the way they're getting a little bit more difficult to play against. Now, defensively, that could be the case. That could well be the case. Did you find what you're looking for there, Bruce?
Yeah, his regular line mates in Ottawa, most one that he put over the 3 years. Uh, and of course, some of these line mates weren't on the team the entire time, but Brady Kachuk, he played with him quite a bit, and that's probably why his points went up. But he got chosen to play with Kachuk because he was good enough. Nick Paul, Chris Tierney, it's not exactly McDavid, Draisaitl. I mean, even Brady Kachuk is obviously not quite at that level. So uh, he's been uh, um, uh, given some opportunity with top level players. I mean, as you'd expect in Ottawa, he became a full time uh, top six player, which is what we expect to see here in Edmonton. I think in Toronto, which I'm just looking up his teammates in Toronto, and mostly he played with guys like Nazem Kadri. Hey, look at Zach Hyman. There you go, 633 minutes together. I like it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a
And
line of. Well, it looks like Brown and Hyman actually are both maybe slotted for right wing though in Edmonton,
hmm yeah,
given the Oilers. So they might not
yeah.
play together that much, but I would expect to see maybe Evander Kane, McDavid, and Connor Brown.
Yeah, well,
We'll see them
Brown is
all. We'll
a
see all the
natural right
combinations.
winger. I mean, Hyman's a right shot winger, but
Yeah.
played a lot of left wing in Toronto because they had all those right wingers that came in at once. Hyman was the one they moved over because they had
I
to
see.
move somebody because they had all these other, you're going to tell Mitch Marner or William Nylander to move, you get one of your versatile worker bees and say, you do it. And Zach Hyman excelled at it. So more power to him. But I think now he's a right winger. But Brown, of all the guys Oilers have at right wing, Brown was the only one who will arrive in Edmonton as a right winger. Hyman came here as a left winger, and so did Warren Fogle, who we're kind of listing on right wing because we're out of players, and so did Derek Ryan, who came to Edmonton as a center. So all three of them gravitated over there because Edmonton had weakness at right wing, and then, in the last 12 months they've moved on from all of Zach Cassian first, then Jesse Puljujärvi, then Kyler Yamamoto, that were all their sort of natural right wingers. Well, they all got traded for
So
cap
right
space. All three of them got traded for basically cap space.
here's the top. Here's the top lines on the Oilers right now. The depth chart. Top line, I have Kane, McDavid, and Connor Brown.
Mm-hmm,
Then the next line, Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Hyman.
mm-hmm.
Next line, Fogle, McLeod, and Janmark. Fourth line, Holloway, Derek Ryan, and Raphael Lavoie. So they've got, that's not a bad lineup. And Raphael Lavoie, for people who aren't familiar with him, like I have high hopes that he can give at least some of what Costin brought. I don't think he's as nasty a fighter, but he's really big. He's bigger than Costin, and he's super aggressive, and he can score. He's got a great shot. So if he can learn at the NHL level to highlight the aggression in his game, the hitting,
Mm-hmm.
the aggression, and play solid defense, Raphael Lavoie could be a good fill-in for Klim Kostin. Now, the Oilers, I think Holland said today he wants to bring in one more center, a tough center. Is that right?
Yep. Well,
So,
probably a bottom center actually, but
yeah,
he
a
doesn't
bottom
want
center.
he doesn't
I
want
said a
Derek
tough center, not a
Ryan.
top center.
Oh, sorry. He doesn't want Derek Ryan, and he doesn't want really Dylan Holloway playing center. And he wants one of Nuge or Draisaitl on the wing so they can both play in the top six. So all you've got in your bottom six, who's a real sort of natural center, is Ryan McLeod. And the other guys are more accustomed to play. I mean, Ryan obviously can play center, but I think he's at the point where he's more effective as right wing. So my wish list, and this guy isn't necessarily a tough center, but he's got some real good attributes, is Michael McLeod, Ryan's brother.
Oh, he signed already, Bruce, in New
Did he?
Jersey. He
He
did.
signed in Jersey?
He did.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
Yeah,
He was just re-signed then today, was he?
correct.
Okay. All
Pretty
right.
sure
Thank
about
you for
that.
that.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Missed that
I think I
one
saw that.
altogether. Then that's my wish list is
Well, your
destroyed.
Twitter wasn't working, and mine was. So
My wish list is destroyed.
it's
Oh well,
like
I wanted to see the lefty and the righty. That's the righty. Michael is a killer in the face-off dot, And
Yeah.
yeah.
So on defense, the Oilers have the same group of 7 D-men, and they have the same at this point, and they have the same 2 goalies. And it was interesting, Bruce. You know, a lot of people wanted the Holland to go a lot bigger, be a lot more aggressive, buy out Warren or trade Warren Fogle for nothing or whatever you could get, trade Cody Ceci or for nothing or whatever you could get, and then and use that cap space, which would amount to $6 million, to bring in other players than Ceci and Fogle. Now, Warren Fogle, down the stretch and in the playoffs, was one of the Oilers' best wingers, two-way wingers. He was really good. Now, and I think at that point in his Oilers career, he was earning his $2.75 million cap hit. He was good value at that point. Really good value. Like even like maybe getting more value. Like I know he wasn't a big scorer, but man, he was playing strong two-way hockey. He was really effective. Cody Ceci, of course, had a bad season. I just want to say that people saying that I don't think it's crazy talk. I think that would have been an interesting approach. I think that it would have been reasonable to do that. It wouldn't have been nuts. It would have been. I wouldn't have complained about it if Holland went in that direction and thought this is what I'm going to do. There's a market crunch right now, and if I can get rid of these players and not have any cap problems, and then I get $6 million to spend, I can do a lot with that amount of money with the cap being the cap crunch being bigger than it's ever been in the salary cap era of the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
The cap hasn't gone up. So I'm not going to, I think that's okay if you held that point of view. That said, some of the scenarios that were being painted were pretty rosy. And one of them, if I heard it once, I heard it 50 times, was you get rid of Ceci's cap hit and then you bring in Scott Mayfield from the New York Islanders. Now it just so happens, it was Scott Mayfield itis on the internet. Well, Mayfield, who I don't know if he's a better defenseman or not than Cody Ceci. Some people are convinced
he's a good player. Yeah.
But he just signed he's 30 years old. He is an okay, like maybe top 4 NHL defenseman, probably. Mm-hmm. Let's say he's top 4 right now. He just signed though a 7-year deal, Bruce, for total $24.5 million, like more than I think it's $3.5 million a year cap hit. I'm so glad. If that was the price, if that was going to be the deal, that we're going to get rid of Ceci but then have this Mayfield for 7 years. Oh man, I do not know about that. Like, and here's what I would say about Cody Ceci, and I'm going to be repeating myself a little bit, or a lot of it. I think with a different defensive system, the zone defense, that Cody Ceci is going to thrive in Edmonton, and he's going to have his best season in Edmonton next year. If he's healthy, if he's recovered, and his injuries are such that he should be able to be recovered from them. And if they change that defensive system to one that focuses more on reading the play, using your smarts to shut down the opposition and covering the front of the net, we're going to be really glad we have Cody Ceci, and he's going to excel with the Oilers. So, I wasn't in the camp about moving on from Fogle and Ceci, and I think that people had kind of unrealistic expectations about what you might be able to do with that cap money. But there were some really good deals that were had. There's no denying it, and maybe Holland could have done better with a more aggressive approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what Holland maybe could have done different was when he signed Warren Fogle's contract after acquiring him by trade, 3 years times 275. Maybe he would have been better served to go 2 times 275 or even 2 times 225 or something, because it might have been less because he wasn't buying a UFA year. Or maybe he would have been better off going 2 times 3.25 for Ceci, and then he would have had some flexibility where you got a guy's contract actually expiring and you can either re-sign that guy like New York did with Mayfield, or you can go and, replace him by some other means. They had no meaningful contracts that expired that year, which is why they're in the cap jail that they're in. And it's one thing to sign all your core players to 8-year deals, like all 4 members of the Edmonton leadership group. But when you've got sort of your rank and file, second and third level players getting 2 and 3 and 4 years, you're really limiting your options. And if there's one thing Holland has done that I would criticize, in the full light of where they are right now, is that he kind of snookered himself with having all these contracts that go down the road, and in many cases way down the road to the end of this decade or close. So, but he's got. I mean, I don't mind Warren Fogle, but right now, if you've got a third line non-center that's sort of outside of your core 12 or your
Yeah, I
main
agree.
players, those are the guys that really should be under 2 million or under 1.5 million in today's environment. And when he replaces Warren Fogle next year, when he re-signs him, it will be for a lower amount.
Another player that a lot of people wanted was Miles Wood
Oh, thanks, but no.
from New Jersey, and
Yeah.
he's kind of a similar player to Fogel, but more physical, a bit nastier. He signed a 6-year
Faster.
deal. 6-year deal was faster. I don't know if he is
Yeah.
now. 6-year
Well,
deal
that's
because he
true.
got injured, had some injuries. 6-year deal for $15 million in Colorado. The Avs also signed Jonathan Drouin on a 1-year deal. Dallas, another big competitor with the Oilers, got Matt Duchene on a 1-year deal for $3 million. That was hard. That would have been nice for the Oilers if they could have gotten that deal. I didn't see a lot of deals actually out there, Bruce, like signed today that I envied. Like
Mhm.
I wish the Oilers could have got that Duchene deal if they could, if they had the money to do that. Like, it'd be nice to have Matt Duchene.
Maybe
But
they could have got Blake Wheeler for 800,000 like New York did.
that would have been nice.
The
Or
guy
Eric,
took a 90% haircut, David, from 8.25 million to 800,000 plus a small amount of bonuses. But wow.
or Eric Gustafson, 1 year at $825,000. He was like a 32-point defenseman last year or something like that. He
Mhm.
signed in Washington. Some of the Anaheim went to town. They signed Alex Killorn. I think it's 33 to a 4-year deal with for more than $6 million per. There was some big money spread around
Mhm.
as usual, and you're often just as well to avoid it if you can. About half the deals don't work out too well for the big long-term contracts, or
Yeah.
I'm going to guess about a half, maybe a third.
149 signings for 264 contract years, so less than 2 years per signing, which is an improvement. Total cap hit of $240 million. Total contract dollars $611 million that it was committed today. $611 million. So
Yeah,
it's like 20 million per NHL team. That's a lot of dough. So the Oilers getting in. I mean, the Connor Brown. The when the shoe drops, they're going to pay for him. But the Oilers sticking to minimum deal. Like I didn't expect them to do a lot on the first. Holland himself said something along the lines of, I'm going to start shopping on Sunday because I can't afford the Saturday prices. But what he did was he shopped it for AHL. Like that was one of his priorities, was to fill in at the AHL. Need a lot of that today with the 4 signings to NHL contract and the Condors themselves signing 4 depth players to minor league contracts. So there's a lot of new players in the organization here. But obviously the milestone signing is the Brown one, and that was done at minimal impact to the immediately upcoming season when the team is most tightly crunched. So
some people also wanted to move out Jack Campbell, and there are some suggestions you could move him out for as little as a first-round draft pick. Like I just think like that was never going to happen. It was going to be, I think, 2 first-round draft picks would be super optimistic in terms of that amount of cap space. It's $20 million still over 4 years. Some people wanted to buy out Campbell, which would also be ruinous. Like they still,
1.5 million for 8 years. 8 years after we're
yeah.
finally getting out from under the Sekera, Lucic, Neal, all that stuff.
Still
That
2 more years of Neil at
I know.
1.9 million.
Now, well, I don't want 8 more years of Campbell at any kind of 7-figure
That would have
amount
been,
in there.
yeah. No, buying him out was not. Given how
There was a
given Billy
team
Joe
that was
Voodoo,
there's a team that was really interested in the guy. Like I heard Chicago actually liked him and were interested. Well, sure, you talk to them. Absolutely. You see what they want and what they. If they
Yeah.
think they're doing you a favor, if they think they're solving their own problem, and then you deal accordingly. But he's still here, and he's one of those contracts that's on the books for a long time to come, and that's the corner that they painted themselves into.
That's the fact, Jack. It's not going to be. Listen, he's got to get better, and we'll see what happens. It's the sane thing to do. The reasonable thing to do is to give him another year. Like I could see if he has another terrible year, then you think about it. But even then, it's really painful. But that you just not now. You just gotta suffer through, and maybe Jack Campbell rebounds and has a 915 save percentage in 30 games and looks just great, and plays every second game in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens, Bruce. So the Oilers, are they done? They got the fourth line center, a tough fourth line center is what Ken Holland wants. That sounds like the last thing on the shopping list. Maybe, I don't know if they'd go for another NHL level defenseman. I don't think so at this point. Getting kind of full up at Bakersfield. And so one more forward maybe, eh?
Yeah, I think a center would be the desired position. I mean, in some ways, the perfect guy to get would be Nick Bjugstad that they just lost. But like I say, he was, because he was a big center and a physical guy and so on, like Costin, I think that physicality raised his price range. But the Oilers are going to miss the two guys. I mean, Bjugstad, he was over 2 hits a game last year. Like, he was bringing the physicality, and he's a huge man.
Yeah.
And Costin the same. So one thing that the Oilers in-season trades last year did was make the team bigger. They brought up DeHarnay, they traded for Costin, they traded for Ekholm, they traded for Bjugstad. Those are all very large men. And they now they've lost a couple of them, so it's going to be probably something that if you can't solve this summer, that it might be high on the list for next year's deadline trade to bring in somebody who's a little aggressive,
Okay, let's just have a quick look, Bruce, at, let's just give me how many games you want to see. 20 update results for free agents that are still out there. David Krejci, he's not coming here. Patrick Kane, he's not. Patrice Bergeron, Tarasenko, he's not coming. Max Domi, he's going to get way too much money for
You're at the rich end of the list, and none of them are going.
Tyler Bertuzzi, I am. I'm just going up. Thomas Tatar, Jonathan Taves. Now there's an interesting name, a guy who's made a ton of money and could presumably want to win another cup and play for a team where he could play for the minimum, just wants to play hockey for another year, play for a cup winner. Jonathan Taves is a possibility. Evan Rodriguez is not signed. I just think this guy's so underrated.
That's not a bad player. That's not a bad player.
Really good hockey player. If the Oilers could get him, I'd be thrilled because,
hang on.
I like that.
I dropped my phone earlier, and of course I hadn't turned off the ringer.
That's a good ringtone.
That's my brother, the Leafs fan, phoning to bemoan the fact that we got another Leaf.
That's a good ringtone, Bruce. It's like you're a secret agent. I didn't know that. Which country are you working
for? Radar Love by Golden Earring, classic song from the middle 1970s.
I think you're an Argentinian spy. All right, just going down the centers here. Anyway, you're right. Zach Parise, he's been mentioned. He's not a center, I don't think. Derek Grant, Derek Brassard.
It's all right. I'm just trying to turn the ringer off.
He's determined.
Yeah. All right, there we go. Now the ringer's off. Sorry about that, folks.
That's okay.
Kind of a clumsy kind of day here at the McCurdy household.
We're all a little discombobulated with Twitter
Yeah,
off track there, Bruce.
man, oh man, what a
Thomas Nosek,
mess.
Garnet Hathaway,
I
Ginger.
like Garnet Hathaway, and I would love to see the Oilers. That would solve your toughness problem, and he can play. He's
Anyway,
just a
there's
solid bottom six,
yeah.
grinding, honest winger who's, but if they could get him for, 1.2 million like he made last year, I think that's what he had. It'd be all right, but he's still out there. He's on the wish list, but at the right price.
There's a lot of good players still out there. So,
Hmm.
for your fifth center, your fourth line center.
Yeah, yeah, he's
But
a winger, Hathaway, so it doesn't completely solve that.
yeah, yeah. Paul Stastny, Pius Sutter, Chris Tierney, Brett Howden. He's an RFA. He's going to stay in Vegas, of course. Colin White.
Did they not qualify Howden? Surely they did. He would have been.
Yeah,
He must be qualified.
he's an RFA. He's listed. I'm
Yeah.
going.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not just going. I'm going with the
Gotcha.
RFAs
Yeah.
and UFAs here. So
Yeah.
Pierre Edouard Belmar. He is now 38 years old.
Yep. Already mentioned him as a big time penalty killer. And that's what he does. He used to play for Colorado. And yeah, he's been around, but he's been a pretty respected player wherever he went. But at 38, I don't know.
No, it doesn't seem to make sense, does it? Well, we'll see what happens. What about Jonathan Toews, Bruce? Do you think that's just not going to happen?
Well, his health, like
Yeah.
he hasn't played much in the last 2 years. He reportedly had long COVID. He had to shut her down for long stretches in each of the 2 years. And I mean, I guess you could. I'm not sure. Is he over 35 by now? He must be.
Toews
So
35. Yeah.
maybe you could get him on a bonus laden games played contract, but that card has already been played. So I'm not sure you really want to do it again.
I'm not sure how much Evan Rodrigues plays center either, but he is a really good player. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. All right, Bruce. Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to add?
I'm fairly encouraged. Evan Rodriguez, I'll tell you in a second now. He took 240 face-offs last year, four
All right.
games. So not none, but not many.
Yeah.
Uh,
Played some center.
Yeah, he played some center with that many draws and sort of split them 50%. But, so he could play center, but yeah. Happy to get Connor Brown. Unhappy not to get Michael McLeod. A little sad about Costin and Yamamoto and Puljujärvi with his hips and Noah Philp with his issues. That's four guys that are pretty young that we've been thinking are up and comers for the Oilers, and all of a sudden they're all gone, just like that. It's been, it's a cutthroat business. If you don't deliver the goods on an ongoing basis, if you don't play up to your salary, you become a liability.
In looking at the lineup right now, I remember all those years that Alan Mitchell at Low Tide would say they need some real NHL players on this roster, and they just didn't have them. And you look at the rosters, and then when you go back in time now and you look at some of those 2010, 11 rosters, 2013, 14 rosters, you just think, oh my goodness. Bruce, you look at this roster, it is stacked
with
NHL
NHLers.
players.
Yeah, they're real
Like
NHLers.
the only ones who might not be are Raphael Lavoie, Vincent Desharnais, and Philip Broberg, arguably, aren't NHL players. Every other player, and did I say Dylan Holloway?
Dylan Holloway.
So and these are all.
He just hasn't proven it yet, but it sure looks
Broberg
like he
and
probably
Holloway are
will.
both high draft picks that have developed well, who've excelled at the AHL level. Lavoie has excelled at the AHL level. Desharnais has. So these are all overripe prospects. So that's the other thing we want. We need overripe prospects, and we need real NHL players. Man, this team has that. and it's a pretty solid. This is a solid roster. Good to see. Thanks for talking, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
I forgot the tagline. In the
In the
meantime,
meantime,
that's it. But is there something before that? And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast. Thanks, Bruce.
malfunction at the junction comes first.
Meeting of the mind.